Hello everybody and welcome to another episode of Historia Politica Publica. This is the second episode of the series about Alan Moore and his graphic novels. In the first episode, I talk about V for Vendetta. I analyze the graphic novel, also establishing some analogies with the contemporary societies, trying to delve into the philosophy of Alan Moore, which he's an anarchist. And here in the second video, I would like to talk about Watchmen, which in my opinion is his most important graphic novel. It's incredibly well written. It touches many different topics that I will talk later. There is a movie. The movie is also great. I believe same as happened with V for Vendetta, the graphic novel led you to develop into different kind of thoughts of Alan Moore and the different characters. In the graphic novel you have the diaries of different characters of the story, which helps you to understand their motives better. But I think I will need to do more than one video about Watchmen because the graphic novel is huge and there are many things to talk about that, so probably this won't be the only one about Watchmen. I wanted to talk also about Promethea, but probably this will be in the next episode. So let's start with it. Watchmen is the masterpiece of Alan Moore. It was published, I think it was in the end of the 1980s, beginning of the 1990s, and it is the only graphic novel considered among the best 100 ever texts in English literature by the magazine Time. That was released some years ago. There was a list of 100 books in which you have like classic like Charles Dickens, Eliot, George Orwell, different authors, Mary Shelley, and so on, and the only graphic novel among the 100 books was precisely Watchmen. Watchmen is a story of heroes in disgrace, about the Cold War, the political extremism, the threat of technology. It also touches themes such as loneliness, greediness, envy, or rage. The story starts to unfold in 1985 in the United States. But during the narrative, Alan Moore will send us to the past. Specifically, we will explore the years of the Depression in the United States after the crash of 1929, the economic crisis, which basically put the world upside down during the last century. We will see the defeat of fascism in World War II. After, we will swim into the dark ocean of the Cold War and the Vietnam War. Precisely the Vietnam War, we will talk about that in the next episode. It is one of the watershed moments in this reality. Because Watchmen is an alternative reality based on the United States, as I mentioned earlier, in which the main difference with the real world, the 20th century, when we had the wars and so on, is the appearance of masked people who call themselves heroes. So, whereas in the 1930s, 1940s United States, you have the post-depression years, you have the war and so on, here in Watchmen it's happening exactly the same, but the only difference is that you have here a lot of people who basically put a mask on and they consider themselves hero and try to establish order, and this is the great difference and will create a series of consequences for the development of the narrative. Apart from being called heroes, those people are called the vigilantes. This is important because vigilantes is one of the rhetoric riddles that Moore uses constantly through his page. The vigilantes, the people who watch, the watchmen. Because the watchmen are those who watch. It says it should be the men who watch, but there are also women in the group of allegedly heroes, and they want to restore order. So those are the vigilantes, the people who vigil, who try to see what is happening in society. At the same time, the watchmen are the heroes under the watch of the others, all the time. it is not just that they are watching others, but they are being watched by the civilians. Those who watch the Watchmen. This is a phrase written in Latin who comes directly from Plato's times. Who will watch the vigilantes? It is the translation. The philosopher Plato of the ancient Greece elaborated the idea that to create a just society, which is the main aim in his book, The Republic, it is necessary to establish a group of people to care for the common good. They will be called the Guardians, and precisely the center-left newspaper in the United Kingdom is called by that name, The Guardian, in clear homage to Plato. The Guardians will be the people who will not be chosen democratically, and yet, due to their allegedly positive credentials, their high wisdom and goodwill, their effort will always be on the benefit of the Republic. This idea is also explored by John Rawls, and also by how is the name of this one of the fathers of neoliberalism is not Milton Friedman, is the other, von Hayek. Yes, von Hayek. He also proposed this idea of people who will be in power for 15 years, not elected by anybody, but basically trying to put the best of the people there in order that they won't be worried to try to win elections in the short term, but only focus on long-term solutions. Obviously, this idea, it is very controversial, and at the same time, it can be useful for some aspects of our contemporary world, which will be interesting to explore and especially to solve, like the climate change, right? It's difficult that the politicians implement radical measures to diminish the effects of the global warming, because that should lead to a kind of long-term solution, and those people most of the times are just worried of being elected in the next 40 years. But coming back to the concept of the Guardians, the Watchmen in this graphic novel are the Guardians. Nobody chose them, but they emerge as the saviors of society. Through the years, the Watchmen, who originally were called the Minutemen, this is very important and relates with the idea of the watch, the minutes and the watch. So I will go a bit later to that, but just to finish my original idea, those watchmen will fall under the temptation to use their power for their benefit. This especially started to happen during the Cold War. You see in the graphic novel corruption, violence against civilians, and narcissism, which gradually destroy the legitimacy that once these masked heroes had among the society. The idea of the anarchist Bakunin that liberty is, quote, the unique condition under which intelligence, dignity, and human happiness can develop and grow, end quote, here is being curtailed precisely by those who theoretically were defending her. Her is liberty. And I mention that because I forgot to mention in the last episode, liberty in V for Vendetta is personified as a woman. During one of the first pages of the book, when V met Eva. When they are on the rooftops under the London sky on the night of the 4th of November, which obviously while they are talking, the night, the 4th of November ends and starts the 5th of November, which was the day in which in 1605 Guy Fawkes tried to blow Parliament. And it is precisely the story of V for Vendetta which unfolds across this idea of Guy Fawkes as trying to eliminate a corrupt organization which was personified in the Parliament at that time. So, in V for Vendetta in the present time, which is 1980 something, liberty is the personification of something that has been corrupted, that is becoming evil through the efforts of the powerful people in society, with the the indirect cooperation of the apathic society. So, whereas V for Vendetta explains if how liberty has been crushed and they need to save her, in Watchmen, liberty is precisely the opposite to the authoritarian and systematic ideology which involves some of the main characters of the, so precisely, or better say specifically, the comedian, which I will talk about him in the next one. Obviously, liberty, following the anarchist ideals of Alan Moore, it is precisely this what we need to fight for, whether in Watchmen or V for Vendetta. Because as Noam Chomsky, probably the most famous anarchist nowadays, political theorist, linguistic philosopher, writer, author of dozens of books. He is now 92 years old, but he has been committed to activism during the whole life. He participated in the movement against the Vietnam War. He's also involved in different commitments, such as recently he signed a letter to release the prisoners in UK, those ecological activists that had been jailed for protesting in order to diminish the negative effect of global warming. Noam Chomsky mentioned how freedom is the precondition for acquiring the maturity for freedom, not a gift to be granted when such maturity is achieved. Chomsky has been greatly influenced by Rousseau's discourse on inequality, by Humboldt's limits of state action, by Kant in his defense of the French Revolution, and of anarchists such as Kropotkin, Bakunin, Malatesta, Emma Goldman, and many others. Also, he mentions George Orwell many times. And it's the idea that freedom must be attained through the actions of the people, not something that must be granted for above. And here in Watchmen, we can see that perfectly. In Watchmen, basically the vigilantes, the Watchmen, the Minutemen, what they say is that, okay, we will grant you freedom, but let us do whatever we want. This works for a while until this group of people start, as I mentioned earlier, to fall under different temptations. And obviously the comedian is perhaps the most authoritarian, neo-fascist character of all, but you have also Rorschach, you have Dr. Manhattan, you have even Adrian Bate Ozymandias, which is my favorite character, but also has this idea that he can solve the problems of society. The characters, I will analyze them in the next episode because there is a lot to talk about them. But just to finish this episode, I would like to mention about this idea of the Watchmen and Minutemen. As I told before, Watchmen makes reference to the people who are under the watch, the people who watch, the vigilantes, coming back to Plato's times. But also Watchmen relates to a material thing, which is the watch, like a clock, but also an immaterial thing, which is time. So this is fundamental, and in the graphic novel is beautifully shown because you have, the novel is divided in 12 episodes. Each episode is obviously an hour, and you can see at the beginning of each episode how the clock is ticking. So let's say in the first episode is the clock is pointing to number one, the second episode to the 2, and like that. In each episode, you see a bit of blood covering the watch. Obviously, in each episode, the blood is covering more and more, until in the 12th episode, you see the whole clock covering with blood. Alan Moore, which has a deep knowledge about history and about what is happening in society, makes a clear analogy with the idea of the minutes to midnight. Minutes to midnight is a scientific approach that has been doing since the Cold War, in which a group of scientists analyze how far or how close are we to the end of the war. and they use this metaphor of the clock, like the minutes to midnight. So let's say during the Cuban Missile Crisis in 1962, there was a moment in which the United States and the Soviet Union were very close to throw among themselves nuclear bombs, which would have destroyed the planet. At that time, the clock was very near to midnight. Very near. I don't remember exactly, but I think it was seconds to midnight. So basically, let's say in 2021, the clock was, I think, 2 minutes to midnight. So let's say if there is 10 minutes to midnight, we are kind of safer, but as long as we are closer to midnight, we are doomed. So yeah, this is another way to say this, the doom clock. So Noam Chomsky used this reference many times. So the minutes to midnight, with this also is a very famous song by Linkin Park. It's also this reference, how in the Cold War we were so close to destroy each other, because for the first time in history there were more than one country with nuclear weapons, whereas in the Second World War only the United States had the power to destroy entire civilization with the bomb, as they did in Japan when they throw bombs in Nagasaki and Hiroshima, destroying the life of hundreds of thousands people. They murder more than 200,000 people, and also they contaminate the islands. Many people survive, but they had malformation for their whole life. And after that, since the Soviet Union developed their own atomic bomb, you had this constant threat between the two superpowers having nuclear power to destroy the entire planet. And this is something which is taught also in George Orwell book 1984, this idea of war is peace, because according to Orwell in that dystopic novel, because there are more than one superpower with atomic bombs, this will mean that no one will be so stupid to attack directly the other, because this will produce a backlash in the form of a huge bombardment which will destroy all the continents of the planet. So this idea, the Minutemen, the Watchmen, minute to midnight. The Minutemen is like the first generation of the heroes raised in 1940s, something like that. But the Watchmen start, I think, in 1950, 1960s. Like they are taking the, let's say, they are the heirs of the Minutemen. There are, I think, some Minutemen who are also Watchmen, or no, I think no. The daughter of one of the characters is a part of Watchmen, and the mother is from the Minutemen. And I am not sure if the comedian is part of the two, probably yes. I will need to check, but yeah, it's the idea of the transition from the Minutemen to the Watchmen, but always this relation with the clock, with the watch, minutes to midnight, how close we are to destroying ourselves, and how these heroes are supporting the USA in their interventions around the world. And I think I will analyze this in the next episode, how the comedian goes to Vietnam, Dr. Manhattan, makes something which will change the future and will be the watershed moment, that it will be different from our reality, and it is about the Vietnam War, how the side in the United States is becoming more authoritarian, how there is the state has been apparently destroyed, but it is not led by the mass of people, but rather by these Watchmen, which had their own power. Apart from Dr. Manhattan, no one has like superpowers as we could consider from other graphic novels, but still they have the means, they have the reach to do whatever they want. But this will be for the next episode, in which I will also talk about the 4 characters that I think are the most interesting in the graphic novel, which are the comedian, Rorschach, Adrian Bate, which is called Ozymandias, and Dr. Manhattan.